And now, WANJIRA Mathai is the chair of the WANJIRA Mathai Foundation and the board member of the Green Belt Movement. She was just named one of the most influential Africans in 2018. She joins us now remotely from Nairobi. WANJIRA, thank you for joining us on 24 Hours of Reality.
Thanks for having me.
WANJIRA, you grew up in Kenya, and you and your family were very active in the environmental community. And since then, your passion has only grown. You were even just named, as we mentioned in the intro, one of the 100 most influential Africans in 2018. So how have you seen the commitments to the environment progress in Kenya since you were younger?
Well, thank you for having me on the show. It's always a privilege to join the former Vice President and to be part of this movement of 24 Hours of Climate Reality. Well, I think one of my greatest passions at the moment is inspiring a restoration generation. I'm working closely with the World Resources Institute based in Washington, but creating a movement here in Africa called AFR 100, the Africa Restoration Movement, that aims to restore 100 million hectares of land by 2030. And so we are drumming up this campaign to get governments. And the good news is it is an Africa-led initiative led by the African Union, sanctioned by the African Union. The Secretariat is the African Union's NEPAD. And every single country on the continent is joining the movement by making a commitment towards 100 million hectares. So good news today as we celebrate 24 hours of climate reality is that we now have 110 million hectares of land committed by 27 different African countries. And so that's a great moment of celebration for us as part of Africa's response to the climate crisis, and certainly as part of Africa's response to ensuring that her people are resilient and are able to adapt to the negative impacts of climate change that we are already experiencing here.
That is some incredible work that you're doing. Can you tell me a little bit of the genesis of that project?
Of the movement. The movement essentially was inspired by the New York Forest Declaration. You'll remember the New York Forest Declaration has, and the Bond Challenge together have a goal, a global goal of restoring 350 million hectares of land across the globe. And so the first real movement around this started obviously many years ago with small grassroots movements like the Green Belt movement right here in Kenya that my mother founded and that continues today to restore landscapes. But massive multi-country commitments started in Latin America, where the World Resources Institute and others inspired the Latin American 20 by 20 initiative to restore 20 million hectares of land by 2020. And this was part of their contribution to the massive New York Forest Declaration, extremely ambitious global commitment to climate that the United Nations, the members of the United Nations sanctioned. And so many countries and regions around the world are asking themselves how they will contribute through their NDCs and through their other national initiatives to this extremely ambitious initiative. And so that was the genesis. And Africa's response has been extremely inspiring. It's ambitious in its magnitude, but really important because we are saying as Africans that this is an important issue for us. It's important for our economic development because agricultural outputs are improved. It's extremely important for our ability to be resilient to what's going on, to have water security, because as you can imagine, a lot of Africa still relies on rainfall and rain-fed agriculture. And so we need to have our landscapes intact and the integrity, especially of our forests, intact so that we can have predictable rainfall patterns, and certainly that our rivers can carry the water that they're supposed to. And so we have extremely clear reasons why this is extremely important for us.
It's a very ambitious goal, but thank you for that and all the effort around that. Now, the climate crisis is fueling a lot of interesting and exciting innovation in Kenya as well, especially for the agricultural communities. So why are those agricultural communities hit the hardest by the climate crisis? And what initiatives are you seeing in these areas to help combat the environmental issues they face?
Well, you know, agriculture, as we know really well, is the breadbasket globally. That's where the food that sustains our life comes from. And so we rely on agricultural landscapes for food production. But here's the interesting thing. Very recently, Kenya did an assessment. Kenya made a commitment, Kenya being the country that I'm from here, made a commitment to restore 5.1 million hectares of land towards the African goal. And when an assessment of where that potential for restoration was done, it was found that unlike what many would have thought, that it would probably have been in forests, a large proportion was actually on croplands, landscapes that are largely used for food production, agroforestry, production for fodder, and that's where the largest restoration potential lies. And that was a surprise to most of us who have been advocating especially for forest restoration. And that's still extremely important. It came in as a major area for restoration. But the surprise was croplands and rangelands, because those have largely been ignored. And unless we are more deliberate about the restoration of croplands and the practices of farmers, how they harvest water, how they till the land, the fertility of the land, the ability to produce outputs from land that are efficient and to keep the fertility of the land intact and keep a lot of the carbon in the soils, then we are threatening the food security of our globe. And then, you know, that is a massive crisis coming. And so agriculture and agricultural productivity remains one of the major opportunities for climate resilience, and certainly for the ability of communities to feed themselves. And so in Kenya, for us, it's a major area for landscape restoration, ensuring that croplands are well planned, well protected, and that agricultural practices are progressive and certainly efficient in their absorption for water and for the fertility of the soils.
Yeah, agricultural communities are often the hardest hit when it comes to the climate crisis, and its effects don't only hit those communities, but like you say, it affects the entire globe, and it's just disastrous. But you know, the climate crisis can also have enormous implications on human health, especially when it comes to infectious diseases. How have Kenyans been impacted by this issue?
Well, on a very fundamental level, this is something that's quite personal to me, because I am a public health practitioner by training. And so I understand quite well just how important a healthy environment is in supporting healthy people, and the intricate connection between a healthy environment and healthy people. So a lot of infectious diseases really depend on a breakdown in the environmental balance. Either there's a lot of water that is pooling, that is not flowing, and therefore there's a lot of the conduct or the cycles of diseases are not interrupted, in which case those diseases continue to prevail. And so I always explain this by saying a healthy environment on a very basic level. A healthy environment supports healthy people. And so we must ensure that we work for the integrity of our landscapes, ensure that the soils are covered and we don't have the runoff that essentially renders our rivers dead and unable to support life, because most of our people rely on rivers, fresh water rivers, for their drinking water. And so we must ensure that they're not loaded with silt and loaded with soil, to ensure that they are healthy. So I think on a very fundamental level, a healthy environment supports healthy people.
Absolutely. Now, Wanjira, historically, your government hasn't prioritized environmental issues, but that focus has shifted in recent years. Why is the climate crisis an issue that the government now feels a duty to respond to? And what actions are they taking to promote change and educate the public?
Well, I think I would say certainly for our part of the world, that's changing because, as I said, the AFR 100 initiative, it's a real movement that is backed by governments. And certainly for my government here in Kenya, environmental protection and especially landscape restoration is a real priority for the Ministry of Environment. I have particularly been privileged to work closely with the Ministry of Environment as part of a consortia that is working on landscape restoration. And they're taking this issue extremely seriously from the highest level of government at the presidential level. So this is changing, and I think we can be hopeful that landscape restoration and certainly the environment is taking a lot more prominence than it has in the past. And it's an opportunity, really, for those of us who've been working in this sector. It's an opportunity to engage, and to engage at a large scale, because that's where we need to create impact. We need scale, and without government, you cannot get scale, especially where in countries where a lot of the large forests are under government protection and government control. So I must say, this is a great opportunity for us. It is part of His Excellency the President in Kenya's legacy agenda. So we know that the opportunity to engage on protecting the environment is real for us. So I would say we are seeing a different climate here. Government is stepping up on environmental protection.
Sounds like you're definitely gaining a lot of momentum in this area. Kenya is also making great strides in educating their youth on problems affecting the environment. So what steps are they taking, and how important are young Kenyans in the fight for a cleaner environment?
Yes, that has been great news. We have a new curriculum, especially for our primary education here in Kenya, and in it contains, and certainly there are great ambitions for an environmental education focus in the curriculum. I am extremely proud to chair the WANJIRA MATHAI Foundation, and that is a foundation that is committed to youth personal leadership and character building, looking at environmental stewardship as one of the character attributes that are critical for success. We've identified 8 character attributes, and environmental stewardship is one of them. Extremely important that our young people grow up loving the environment, wanting to protect it, because we, after all, protect what we love. And so we have to create in them a sense of passion about the environment. And we are starting from young children, from the age of 10 years old. And that is a movement also that I feel is extremely important, because we have focused for so many years on cognitive abilities, building and strengthening cognitive abilities through our education system. But now there's a recognition that some of these non-cognitive attributes and skills are actually perhaps even more predictive for long-term success. And so we are starting to build a movement around building strong character and personal leadership around issues like stewardship, around issues like courage and integrity, honesty, commitment to excellence, so that our young people can grow up, yes, with the strong cognitive abilities, but also with a very strong sense of who they are and ability to lead themselves before they go out and lead others.
They are future leaders, and they're bound to be doing some great things under the education policies and programs that you put forth. In your own work, you also highlight women's empowerment and environmental sustainability. So why do women play such an important role in combating the climate crisis? And how can they be further empowered to stand up for change?
Yeah, women are really probably globally at the forefront of the climate crisis, especially they're the ones who lead in household energy use and household energy security. They're the ones who fetch the firewood. They're the ones who ensure that there's a meal on the table in the evening, in the morning, and in the middle of the day. And certainly with agriculture, a lot of women are the ones who produce the food on the land. So I think they're the ones who feel they're on the front lines, as we say, of the climate crisis. And so women have to be part of the solution, centrally so, because they will be the ones who are affected the most. And often with women come the children. And so women and children would be the greatest victims of this crisis. And certainly we know that because they are centrally involved in the sector of whether it's energy security, food security, they are also probably the most likely to be most active in solutions, in both generating solutions and in implementing those solutions. So yes, we advocate for women's involvement centrally in addressing the climate crisis, whether it's agriculture, wherever it is. And the Greenbelt movement has demonstrated this through the movement to restore landscapes around the country, especially working initially with women's groups. And women's groups, quite deliberately, they're the ones who understood profoundly what it meant to have food insecurity, water insecurity, and fuel insecurity. And all of those three really threatening the livelihoods of entire communities.
Well, Wanjira, I want to thank you so much for being here on 24 Hours of Reality to share your perspectives with us. And more importantly, thank you so much for your passion and the work that you do.